Around this time last year, I'd taken a psychology class taught by Steven Pinker, who's a great dude, great psychologist, great thinker, great author, but primarily a linguist. And so when we got to the lecture on language, I was really compelled by the way that he taught it. I find the question of how our brains understand language to be really fascinating. And in particular, I find the question, how do we understand and create infinitely new creative sentences, to be pretty fascinating. There was actually a thinker, a linguist called Noam Chomsky. One of Chomsky's major contributions was showing that language has both syntax and meaning, that a sentence can be grammatically correct and yet semantically meaningless. He gave an example of colorless green ideas sleep furiously. His proposition was that sentences are formed from some sort of hierarchical phrase structure, that there are these grammar rules which dictate how we kind of build up this tree which turns into a sentence. So a sentence, for example, is formed of a noun phrase and a verb phrase, and a noun phrase in turn is formed of its own distinct components, so is a verb phrase, and you can create these infinitely recursive trees which allow you to, through learning the structure, create infinite sentences. It's a really elegant explanation for creativity in language, why we're able to come up with so many new sentences and why we can understand sentences we haven't heard before. Now, Chomsky obviously goes much further than this. He creates this whole theory of universal grammar. It's not without critique, of course, but we're not getting into that here. What I'm interested in is what I was talking about just before, the hierarchical phrase structure and these grammar rules. Because for some reason, I found that sentence, the colorless green ideas sleep furiously, I found that just immensely compelling. Your brain immediately fires up and it starts thinking, well, how can an idea be colorless and green? How can it sleep? How can it sleep furiously? Right? It's just interesting. And being a computer science nerd, being a coding nerd, I saw the tree and I go, oh, I know a data structure for that. I know how I could model that in a program. So I started to think, is this something that I could write a program to simulate? Could I generate these sentences programmatically? So immediately I started to code. So I set up a little GitHub repo and I made a basic Python class. It just had some functions for the basic parts of the most basic sentence possible. So a sentence, like I said, most basically formed of a verb and a noun phrase. And so I filled out these functions with a little bit of code. The only real important part were these three functions here, where you create a sentence by putting a verb phrase after a noun phrase. And then the verb phrase and the noun phrase have their own structures, where a noun phrase is composed of an article, an adjective, and a noun, and a verb phrase is composed of a verb and a noun phrase. So I gave the program a very limited vocabulary, something like, 5 words of each, and I ran it. And what I got were sentences like these. A green cow drank a fast cat. A fast squid wrote a green cat. The slow boy watched a red cat. Do these sentences make any sense at all? Well, yes and no. They make grammatically correct sense, they're all grammatically correct, but you can't really think about them as having any meaning. They're semantically meaningless. And yet, they're kind of fun to think about, right? A green cow and a fast cat, right? Like, what is that? What kind of story does that start telling in your mind? So then I made the sentences just a little bit more complex by adding what are known as prepositional phrases. So what this means is you precede a noun phrase with a preposition in the latter half of the sentence. So you get sentences like, the fast cat eats a red dog near the green man. And the near, that's your preposition that you're talking about. So again, you're still getting these totally whimsical sentences, maybe a little bit more compelling with the prepositional phrases, but still, they don't mean anything, but they are grammatically correct. So then I had this idea to kind of create a book out of these sentences. And I think part of this is coming out of the fact that I've been working and I'm still working on an actual book, actually writing something that means something, but it's frustrating. It is a frustrating process, as anyone who has ever written a book will tell you. And so I thought, why don't I take out that frustration by writing a completely nonsensical book? And by writing, I mean letting my program do it. So I thought, okay, let's see if this would actually work, and I knew of this place on Amazon, it's KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, where you could upload a manuscript and you could get a printed copy of your book. So I thought, why don't I try that with just the manuscript that I have right now, just these kind of like 10 words used over and over again in these very basic sentences. Let's see what it looks like. And so that's what I did. I went onto Amazon, I uploaded the manuscript, and I ordered a proof copy, which is just a copy and it's kind of given to the author at cost. And then I waited for it to ship to me. And soon enough, I had it in hand. This is the proof copy, Experiment in Universal Grammar. Wow. But as you can see, it's just full of these sentences, which are, like the ones I was just reading to you earlier. And so I thought this is just kind of cool. I thought, having this little guy is a fun conversation starter. And so I thought, okay, this might just work. But then I thought, okay, how do I make this into a compelling YouTube video? Because I've been working on this for a while, I've been filming, all along the way, and I thought, okay, let's make a video out of this. And so I stumbled across the longest book ever. It's called The Blah Story by Nigel Thom. I think it's 23 volumes, 11 point something million words, and it's a little bit hard to describe. Let me read you an excerpt from it. Upon blah up with the blah, blah perceived that it was in the blah of a blah, blah of the blah of the blah, but far blah in blah the blah of these blah. Now, no offense to Nigel, but I thought my sentences were way cooler than these. They both don't make sense, but mine are cooler. So I thought, okay, fair enough. I'm gonna steal the longest book in the world. I'm gonna steal that title. I'm gonna take it over. So I jumped back into the code. Mind you, this is like November now. So what I did, I cleaned up the code a little bit because it was really messy. Made a decent little cover in Photoshop. Added some support for what are known as coordinating conjunctions. And this is the bit where I said the tree is infinitely recursive. This is where it happens. Is when you can have kind of two clauses thrown together. I then ran into a little issue when doing a test on Amazon with the KDP stuff where my manuscript was way too long, it was way too many pages. What I did is I shrunk the font size down as small as possible. And I made the books as big as possible, the biggest page size and page count. So then I knew that I could fit enough words in each volume. I knew that 15 volumes would be enough. And so I set my program up with a larger vocabulary and ran it with 12 million words as the goal, meaning that I would beat Nigel Thom by about 700,000 words. I then uploaded all of these volumes to Amazon, ordered copies of them, and waited for them to arrive. Now, it did take a minute for them to all arrive. There were a lot of books, but they finally made it. I modified the cover a little bit, but as you can see, they are a thing of beauty. I'll show you the inside. You might remember the font size from before. Well, this is the font size now. Hopefully we focus in on that. Oh yeah, there you go. And I think what's cool about the sentences that you get from it are that some of them are really complex, some of them are very simple. So there's very simple. Something refused truly. But then you also get sentences like complete, curved, crushing, well-informed, supernatural, but unique, emotional, entire sunflower waved. Those are 2 consecutive sentences. So you get all sorts of sentences in these 15 volumes, each of which being 780, 800 pages long. That's a lot of words, 12 million words. So what does this mean? Well, mission success, right? The Blah Story has been dethroned after a decade of dominance. Jire now reigns supreme as the longest book in the world. Not that that means anything or really matters. Anybody can take this program and make it, slightly longer. Anybody could write their own program and make a book which is longer if they really wanted to. They could just, take a dictionary and sort it a bunch of times. That's not the important part. The whole longest book in that's just a thing for the title and the thumbnail. The cool part about this, in my opinion, is the theory. It's the structure of these sentences. It's the ability to create new, infinitely many new sentences, and for our brain to be able to kind of understand them, and for our brain to be able to pick up on these little stories and try and create this meaning around, even though we know how they were created, that being meaninglessly, how we can create meaning around these sentences, how we can invent these stories, and how there's just so much whimsy within them. I remember being in the lecture hall when Pinker said, "Colorless green ideas sleep furiously," and I remember thinking, wow, that's a cool sentence. And maybe you disagree with me, maybe you think it's stupid. It is stupid, it is a little bit stupid. But this was a fun little way to explore that, because truthfully I think that language is a really interesting way to explore the wilderness that is our brain. We don't understand a whole lot about it, but in projects like these and in theories like Chomsky's, you can kind of start to get a sense of just how wonderful what's going on up there really is. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope you didn't find it too stupid. It was a lot of fun. With regards to environmental concerns surrounding using that much paper for books, I get it 100%. You'll notice that 2 videos ago I donated a bunch of money to plant trees. And part of the justification behind that, first of all, is just a worthy cause, but part of that was also, you'll notice kind of with the posting dates, I said I printed these in like November. I was feeling a little bit guilty surrounding that. So did my part to carbon offset, but yeah, I do feel a little guilty surrounding that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to subscribe, feel free to like. Spent a fair bit of time working on this, and it was a lot of fun. If you want to check out the code, and if you want to check out some of the sentences, GitHub link is in the description. If you want a little copy of a similar book, if you think it's a fun conversation starter, print it yourself. I'm not selling this. I'll be selling a real book soon enough. So just check out the sentences on GitHub. It's not worth printing it off, honestly. If you want to support the channel in a more useful way, my growth books are on Amazon. They're the daily planners that I use to help keep myself accountable, help keep myself productive. They've helped thousands of people, so feel free to check that out. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next time.